Alright, this is Chat UTD, another feature video, this time looking at a progress assessment of Ruben Amorim in his 4 months in charge of United. It's the first international break we've had since Amorim came in, and feels like a good time to assess that progress, and 4 months is a decent amount of time. I'm also pleased to be doing it now because it's going to be a lot more positive than it would have been a month ago, for example, because of course there's been an upturn in results. So I'm happy to do it, happy it's now rather than I'll say at the end of January or start of February. We're going to look at style of play, results, who's improved, who's stayed the same, who's regressed in the squad. We're going to look at squad development. We're going to look at persona, gatekeeping, highlights, lowlights, and then all of the factors influencing how it's gone so far. Let's start with style of play. Amorim stayed true to his promise that he wasn't going to change his system. His system is 3-4-3 and variations of that. And whilst he has stayed true to that system, I don't think this is the way he wants his team to play. I don't think he's imposed his style of play on this group at all. I don't see really a massive difference stylistically between what we were watching under Ten Hag and what we're watching now. The team struggles to play out from the back. They're ponderous. It's boring. There's no structure to the play. There's no fluidity or cohesion. There's no pace to it. We don't know how to press without the ball. And we're a better team on the counter-attack and in transitions and in moments. I would add that I think that's a personnel problem rather than a manager problem. When he first came, I mentioned in the video that if you look at the players we have in the squad or had in the squad at that point, in terms of a nuts and bolts, will they fit into an Amorim 3-4-3 system? You could put players nominally in positions. My question was, do they have the characteristics to do what he will ask of them? And the answer really has been no. And he hasn't had any or not enough extra players to create a team that is more in his image. But he hasn't imposed his style of play. I think he has adapted. And in recent weeks, I think he's been more pragmatic and he's made the team harder to beat. But he's not imposed his style of play so far. Difficult to judge that, really. Results. He's overseen 28 games, so I broke it down to the first 14 and the second 14 games. In the first 14 games, we won 5, drew 3 and lost 6. And in the last 14 games, we've won 7, drew 4 and lost 3. So we've lost 3 fewer games. We've won 2 more, which is an improvement, isn't it? And there's something quite encouraging about that. When a manager comes in, invariably there's a bounce. And either that bounce continues and that manager does well, or it doesn't continue, and after a period of time, they just become part of that carousel, another manager that gets sacked and then another manager comes in. The fact that he really struggled to impose his way on the players to start with, but with time and with coaching and with them getting more used to him, we're starting to now see results, I think lends itself to maybe that we're going to see more sustainable change as and when that change occurs. I'm being optimistic. That might be completely wrong. But I would certainly hope so, rather than just get that bounce that's inevitable and then it stops. So I'm hoping that the fact the longer he's had with the players, the better it's got, means that this is going to be more sustainable. And a feature of any improving team is that you become harder to beat. And obviously we've lost 3 in the last 17 games. By the way, I'm counting the Arsenal game in the FA Cup that we won on penalties, I'm counting that as a draw. And the Fulham game that we lost on penalties, I'm counting as a draw as well, because over 120 minutes, those games were both draws. Who's improved under him? Bruno's played better under him. I don't know if he's improved as a player at his age, but he's improved his performances under him. De Ligt was having a good season anyway, but I think he's been absolutely brilliant in the last 6 or 7 weeks. I think he's definitely improved. And I think Xerxes has improved pretty significantly since Christmas. A large majority of the squad have stayed the same. Players that were having a good season, like Mazraoui, continue to have a good season. Players that were somewhere in the middle have continued to be somewhere in the middle, and players that have been poor have continued really to be poor. The two players that have struggled to adjust to his way of doing things are Garnacho and Højlund, and that's borne out by the fact that until the Leicester game just before the international break, neither of them had scored since Amorim came in. Their drought started when he came in and carried on until a week on Sunday ago. Bit surprising with Højlund, because without knowing tons about Gyökeres at Sporting Lisbon, I thought Højlund was in that mould and that he would be a very good frontman leading the line for an Amorim team, and maybe he will be, but you can't argue with the fact that one goal in however many games is obviously pretty poor return. Garnacho has obviously been in and out of the team. He's called him up on his attitude. He's brought him back in, which means he's not burnt bridges with him. So it's an interesting one to keep your eye on, Garnacho. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we saw Garnacho in the summer, which I wouldn't want, but I can see that happening. But I'm still optimistic he can help us for the rest of this season. And I'm starting to move into the next subject, actually, which is squad development. I think the biggest thing he's done is get rid of Rashford. For far too long, Rashford was a protected species at United, and his place in the team was not dependent on performance or attitude. It was driven by political reasons and commercial reasons, and he was a protected species at the club, as I said, and coaches just pretty much had to pick him. Maybe this board backs this manager to have more autonomy over those types of things, and that's why he's ultimately been able to oust him from the squad. I still admire him for doing it, though. It's a big call. No one else has had the balls to do it. And he's been honest. He said, look, the lad's not training properly. And if he starts showing a better attitude, he'll be back in the team. If he starts to, what did he say? If he wants it, then he'll be back. And he gave him a chance, and he dumped him. He didn't even have him in the squad for 6-7 weeks. And he made it untenable for him to stay at United. Didn't sort of renegade on it, and then obviously, thank God, Villa came in, and hopefully he won't play for United again, because that's needed to be the case for a long, long time. So that's the biggest thing he's done, which I admire him for. He's siphoned out, I suppose, Anthony, Malacia. Others don't play all that often that maybe previously were getting too much game time or had too many chances, but I'm sure there's ones in the squad that he, if he had a choice and if he could be completely cutthroat, he'd get rid of. It's interesting to me what he's done with Casemiro, because Casemiro was on the beach. He'd semi-retired. He made no secret of the fact that I'm going to take my money. I like it in Manchester. I like the club. I like the fans. And I'll just stick around for the remainder of my contract. Whether I play or not was the message I sort of got. And Amorim barely used him. You look at the shape Casemiro's in. If he's not playing, you worry a little bit about if he can come back, really. But through necessity, because we've needed him, because of injuries, he's brought him back in. But he's not just been a body standing in the middle of the park not doing anything. He's played pretty well, which means that the manager has never completely burnt bridges with him. He's obviously continued to have a relationship with Casemiro that's good enough so that when he brings Casemiro back in, Casemiro plays all right. And that's an art form in management. I've said many times over the last few years, whilst Man United do have players that are not good enough and don't have the wherewithal to play for our club and need to be better, part of your role as a manager is to motivate players and keep them switched on. And he's done that with Casemiro quite clearly. He's done that with him because of what we're seeing now. So I like the fact with Garnacho, with Casemiro, he'll leave players out. He will ostracise them to some degree. But obviously whatever he's doing behind the scenes, he's skillful enough at it to then be able to bring them back in, and they'll still do a job for him. Because we can have an idealistic vision that football players are they're playing for the shirt, they're not playing for the manager. They don't play for the shirt. We've seen it with this group. Leaking stuff to the press, saying stuff about the manager. The modern day football players are selfish. They don't play for the shirt. They play for themselves. So I think he's done really well with that. And if he had more freedom, I think he'd do a lot more in terms of squad development. In terms of his persona, I think he's spot on. Good with the media, which is important at United, considering how often he's wheeled out. He's interviewed more times than a murder suspect. You have pre-match press conference, post-match press conferences, and I think other than that, he's on feature interviews about 3 or 4 times a week. My understanding of a head coach is that they coach the team and they're responsible for the manager's press conferences. And essentially, when you've got a football board, someone from that football board would be wheeled out to do other communication. That's certainly the way it's probably going. But if you're United, who are you going to put out there? Omar Barada or Ruben Amorim? Of course you're going to put Ruben Amorim out. He's charming, he's personable, he's not for me, but attractive, you know, in terms of the way people would look at him. And yeah, of course he's going to be put out there. And I think by and large he speaks a lot of sense. He's very honest. I'm worried that you think I've got a man crush on Ruben Amorim. No, I haven't. Scrap the attractive bit. I like the fact on the sideline he's fuming when we're not doing very well, and you can see it. He's seething. He prowls up and down. He's got presence, and I imagine he's quite impactful when he talks to the team. He said things like, "Could be potentially the worst Man United team in Premier League history." One thing Mancunians appreciate, Man United fans appreciate, and I alluded to this with Jim Ratcliffe, they appreciate honesty, and I hope he never veers away from that. Touch worried that over the last couple of weeks, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, he's started just to sort of toe the party line a little bit, and I hope that doesn't become a feature, because one of the reasons I think he's got so much credibility amongst the United fan base and why he's so well thought of is because of how brutally honest he's been. It's been refreshing. But Ten Hag was quite bullish when he first came in, and then the second season just became another puppet for the idiot owners of the club. So I hope that Amorim retains that integrity and keeps being honest. But he's good. He's good with the media, and as I say, I like his presence. I like the cut of his jib. The highlights for me have been City away before Christmas, Liverpool away after Christmas, the Arsenal game in the FA Cup away from home. And you might say this is recency bias, but I actually think the last 2 games, Sociedad in the Europa League was a big game, and we haven't had many big games this season where you've got to win, where there's jeopardy, and there was, and we did, and there was an energy, and there was a verve, and there was an enthusiasm, and Old Trafford came to life. There was goals, there was excitement, so that was a highlight. And against Leicester, that is the type of game with United letting you down and messing it up written all over it. And they didn't. It was a standard 3-0 win against a very poor team. But how often are we doing that these days? Not very often. I really enjoyed it. I thought we were really good against Leicester. And on that, if you compare it to and I'm going to go on to the lowlights now, if you compare it to that game against Leicester in the FA Cup at home a few weeks earlier, we were absolutely awful in that game. And that's the same opposition. But we were, oh God, it was a terrible game of football. And that, even though we won, was one of the lowlights. And just Old Trafford in general has been the lowlights. Has been where the lowlights have been. You know, we got beat at home to Forest, Bournemouth, Newcastle, Brighton, Crystal Palace, Fulham in the FA Cup. The Palace game, the Brighton game in particular, I looked at the fixture and I thought, if it's a team between 6th and 13th coming to Old Trafford, they're going to beat us. And it's not just beating us, they're outplaying us. It's not smash and grab. And Old Trafford needs to be your fortress. It needs to be where you build that connection with the fans, where the connection between the players and the fans, connection between the manager and the fans. And that has to be something that improves, because it's been really poor so far. So that's been a disappointment. The factors for all of this for me are he's coming to a team in, when did he come in? Early November, with a very clear style of play that's quite different to what this squad is used to. Now, if this squad of players had the wherewithal to play for a club like United and had the quality and had the adaptability to be able to adapt to what he wants them to do, then, well, if's the biggest 2-letter word in the dictionary, isn't it? Then we'd be golden. But They clearly haven't got that adaptability. So that's a big factor. He hasn't got the tools that he needs to do the job that he wants to do, which is why he hasn't been able to impose his style of play as much as he would have liked to. If I'm Amorim and I look below me at the squad and above me at the board, I'm looking below me at the squad and I'm thinking this is a group of players who don't have, and I've mentioned it many times before, the physical, emotional, mental and psychological wherewithal to play for a club of Manchester United stature. If I look above me then at the board to try and get me players who do have those qualities, they can't do it because they haven't got the money. So he's stuck in the middle of a shit sandwich. Well, the bread's the shit. And it's really, what do you do with that? Moving forward, what does he do with that? I'm going to come back to that actually, because if I think about for the rest of this season, what's the priority for the rest of this season? What's success for the rest of this season? Moving forward, looking ahead. I'd love us to win the Europa League. I don't think we're going to. I think the injuries will be a problem. We've already got a wafer-thin squad. And I just think the more you push them, the more injuries you're going to get. And some players will come back to replace newly injured players, but I just think it's going to be like that. And I don't think we've got a good enough squad to deal with that. So, and I also just don't think we're good enough in general. So, but I would say getting to the semis or the final of the Europa League at least keeps the season interesting. And hopefully we can continue to be on something of a decent run in the Premier League. But the Premier League becomes bordering on irrelevant, really. Something I meant to mention, actually, I've just reminded myself by talking about the wafer-thin squad. It says a lot about him as a coach that as the squad pool has got smaller, the results have got better, which says that when he's working with a finite group of players, he's obviously very good. Some of our best results and our best consistency over the last few weeks have come without Ahmad, Maguire, Martinez, influential players. And I think he's obviously getting his message across to that finite group of players, which again is a plus point. Going back to how does he deal with the fact that below him he's got players who haven't got the wherewithal to do what needs to be done. Above him he hasn't got the money to give him what he needs. So what do we do moving forward beyond this season then? That's a big question. It's a big challenge. Quenda's an example. He obviously wanted Quenda, the right wing back from Sporting Lisbon. Why would he not want him? He knows him inside out. He's the one that's blooded him. He's from Sporting Lisbon. He fits the profile of the type of player he wants. He can play in his system because he's done it before, and he wouldn't cost the earth. And Chelsea come in and get him, so he doesn't get his target. And if it's going to continue to be like that, where he can't get his number one targets because we haven't got the money, which is essentially what's going on here, it's going to be really difficult for him. That's a mitigating factor. And bear in mind, and I said this before in another video recently, we're not talking about the top targets being A1, ready to go, brilliant players. We're talking about our top targets probably being potential. And we can't even get them. So we're going down to options B, C, D of a poorer pool of players. And we're adding to a substandard squad. So I'll even that out. I must say, you're not going to hear this very often, I have to give the recruitment team within Ineos credit, because Dorgu, not seen much of him, but so far so good, looks very good. Heaven looks an absolute find. Ugarte's steady. Delict's been good. Mazraoui's been very good. Xerxes improving. And Yoro's obviously a young lad with lots of potential. So they've done all right with their recruitment so far, but particularly thinking about Dorgu and Heaven, if they can keep uncovering gems like that, and they've got expert recruiters of young players that maybe we've never heard of, then maybe he can build something of a team. But it's going to have a ceiling, isn't it? You can't win titles like that. I don't think you get top 4 like that, but maybe you get top 6. That's my target. That would be my target for him next season. You get top 6 and you win a trophy next season, you've swum the channel from where we are now. Is that going to be enough, though, for the deluded people that run the club? Amorim's never going to fulfil his potential at United, because potentially I think he's a brilliant manager. I mentioned a while ago, whilst there's nothing not to like about Amorim so far, I really do like him, but is he the profile of manager we need, given that every other area of the club is in crisis management? So did we need a firefighter? So I mentioned that a while ago. Maybe I'm doing him a disservice. Maybe he's more of a firefighter than I give him credit for. Maybe he is a firefighter. Maybe he is a scrapper. Because if you listen to what Sporting Lisbon fans tell you, he went into a mess there. First 6 months were really difficult and he pulled them through. But it's very different in Portugal. You've got two, if you're Sporting Lisbon, you've got two other teams that you're up against. United, what are we, 14th, 13th, whatever we are, you've got 13 or 12 teams above you with no money and a substandard squad, and the only option really is to get more substandard players and probably have to sell your best players to make money available for that. It's not the prelude to success, I wouldn't say. I'll end on this, and I've said it before. He's the right manager at the right club with the wrong owners at the wrong time. And as I said, I don't think he will fulfill his potential at Man United, because I think potentially he's a really good manager. And a lot of that is not the reason he won't do what I think he's capable of doing. It's not his fault. Have to be fair though, I used to say it with Ten Hag. When you walk into Man United, you're not walking into a settled, harmonious environment conducive with success. You're not. So you have to be the best for that situation. And hopefully you can be. But in terms of longer term success, I don't know if he'll ever end up getting there. Because, as I say, he looks below him, it's not good enough. He looks above him, it's not good enough. Very difficult for a manager to be in that position. So that's my assessment of him. Back to proper football in the next week or so. Glazers out.